Barron Trump had always been known for keeping a low profile despite his famous last name. But recently, a simple yet profound act of kindness put him in the spotlight in a way no one expected. It all started when Barron, now a young man standing at an impressive height, came across a story that deeply moved him. An 80-year-old janitor still working tirelessly to make ends meet. The elderly janitor, Mr. Walter Henderson, had spent decades cleaning hallways and classrooms, never complaining, always showing up with a warm smile. He had been working at the same school for over 40 years, long past the age when most people would have retired. His hands were rough from years of labor, his back slightly hunched from years of bending and lifting. But what stood out the most was his unwavering dedication to his job. Barron first heard about Mr. Henderson through a conversation with a family friend who mentioned how the old janitor refused to retire, not because he didn't want to, but because he simply couldn't afford to. The thought lingered in Barron's mind for days. How could someone who had given so much to his community still be struggling? One evening, Barron sat at the dining table, scrolling through stories of elderly workers across America, many of whom had to keep working due to rising living costs. His heart ached. He knew he wanted to do something, not just for Mr. Henderson, but for others like him. After some thought, he decided to visit the school and meet Mr. Henderson in person. With the help of a few contacts, he arranged to take a quiet tour of the school where the elderly janitor worked. Walking through the halls, he finally spotted the man himself, pushing a mop, carefully cleaning the floors just as he had done for decades. Barron approached him with a friendly smile and introduced himself. At first, Mr. Henderson didn't recognize him, but after a moment, his eyes widened. "You're Barron Trump?" he asked, surprised but still maintaining his humble demeanor. Barron nodded and quickly redirected the conversation, not wanting the focus to be on himself. Instead, he asked about Mr. Henderson's life, his years at the school, and why he was still working at his age. The old janitor chuckled, wiping his hands on his worn-out uniform. "Well, son, life doesn't always go as planned. I had some savings, but they ran out faster than I expected. Social Security helps, but it's not enough. And, well, I love this place. Keeps me moving, you know?" Barron listened intently, absorbing every word. It wasn't just about money. This man had dedicated his life to something bigger than himself. And yet, he deserved to rest. That night, Barron knew what he had to do. He reached out to his parents and discussed ways to help Mr. Henderson, but Barron didn't just want to write a check and walk away. He wanted to do something meaningful that would also inspire others. He decided to set up a GoFundMe campaign with the simple goal of raising enough money for Mr. Henderson to retire comfortably. He shared the story online, carefully keeping the focus on the janitor's hard work and dedication rather than on himself. Within hours, donations started pouring in. People from all over the country resonated with Mr. Henderson's story. They left heartfelt messages, expressing their gratitude for his years of service and their desire to help. Some were former students who remembered his kindness. Others were strangers who simply wanted to make a difference. As the campaign gained traction, news outlets picked up the story. The humble janitor who had quietly worked in the background for decades was now at the center of a heartwarming movement. Within a week, the fundraiser exceeded expectations, raising tens of thousands of dollars. When Barron returned to the school to share the news, Mr. Henderson was speechless. His hands trembled as he looked at the young man before him, realizing that his years of hard work had not gone unnoticed. Tears welled up in his eyes as Barron handed him a letter detailing the amount raised and what it meant for his future. "You don't have to work anymore, sir," Barron said with a warm smile. "You've done more than enough." For the first time in years, Mr. Henderson allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where he could finally rest, spend time with his grandchildren, and maybe even take that fishing trip he had always dreamed of. Overwhelmed, he pulled Barron into a hug, something completely unexpected. "I don't know how to thank you, son," he whispered. "You've already thanked me," Barron replied. "You've inspired me." The story didn't end there. Inspired by Barron's initiative, others began looking into similar cases of elderly workers who needed help, More fundraisers were launched, and conversations about retirement security gained momentum. Barron, despite his reserved nature, had sparked something much bigger than himself. His simple act of kindness had reminded people of the power of compassion and community. As news of Barron Trump's heartfelt gesture continued to spread, people across the country found themselves deeply moved by his quiet yet powerful act of kindness. Social media was flooded with messages of support, with many praising the young Trump for using his platform to make a real difference in someone's life. Former students of the school where Mr. Henderson worked started sharing their memories of him. Many recalled how he would always greet them with a warm smile, offer words of encouragement before big exams, and even help pick up books that had been accidentally dropped in the hallways. "He wasn't just a janitor," one former student wrote. "He was part of our school family." Major news outlets reached out for interviews, but Barron, staying true to his nature, didn't seek the spotlight. He let Mr. Henderson's story take center stage, wanting people to focus on the lesson rather than on himself. When asked why he did it, Barron simply said, "It just felt like the right thing to do. No one who has worked this hard for so long should have to struggle in their later years." The impact of his gesture didn't stop at Mr. Henderson's retirement. Inspired by the overwhelming response to the fundraiser, Barron began looking into ways to help other elderly workers in similar situations. He started working quietly with charities that focused on senior citizens, helping to raise awareness and funds for those who, despite a lifetime of hard work, found themselves struggling to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson's life had taken a turn for the better. No longer burdened by the long hours of janitorial work, he was finally able to enjoy his time with his family. His grandchildren, who had always wished he could spend more time with them, now had the chance to make memories that had once seemed impossible. He took up gardening, a hobby he had always dreamed of pursuing but never had the time for. One particularly touching moment came when Barron received a handwritten letter from Mr. Henderson. In it, the former janitor expressed his deepest gratitude, not just for the financial help, but for the kindness and respect Barron had shown him. "You didn't just give me money," he wrote. "You gave me dignity. You reminded me that my years of work mattered." The letter was something Barron kept close, a reminder of why small acts of kindness could make a huge difference. So, time passed. More and more people began following Barron's lead, launching similar fundraisers and initiatives to help elderly workers in their own communities. Inspired by his actions, local businesses started offering retirement assistance programs, and schools across the country began recognizing long-serving staff members who had often gone unnoticed. What started as a single act of kindness had sparked a nationwide movement. And as for Barron, he remained the same, quiet, thoughtful, and always looking for ways to help without seeking attention. While the world often focused on his last name, those who had witnessed his generosity knew that his actions spoke louder than any headline ever could. In the end, Barron Trump's heartfelt gesture didn't just change one man's life. It inspired thousands, proving that kindness, no matter how simple, has the power to create a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could ever imagine. As the months went by, Barron Trump's act of kindness continued to inspire people across the country. Community leaders, students, and even celebrities began stepping forward to support elderly workers who were struggling to make ends meet. What had started as a simple gesture for one man had turned into a nationwide conversation about the challenges faced by older Americans who couldn't afford to retire. Barron, though never one to seek the spotlight, quietly continued his efforts. He started collaborating with organizations focused on retirement security, helping raise funds and awareness for elderly workers. While he wasn't active on social media like many his age, his actions spoke louder than words, and people took notice. Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson embraced his retirement with gratitude and joy. With the financial support he had received, he moved into a small but comfortable home closer to his daughter and grandchildren. No longer tied to a demanding work schedule, he spent his days gardening, reading, and taking long walks in the park. His health improved, and for the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. One day, Barron received an unexpected phone call. It was Mr. Henderson's daughter, Susan. Her voice was full of emotion as she thanked him once again for what he had done. "You didn't just help my father retire," she said. "You gave him years of life back. He smiles more now, he laughs more, and he talks about you all the time." Hearing this warmed Barron's heart. He had never done any of this for recognition, but knowing that Mr. Henderson was truly happy made it all worth it. Inspired by this experience, Barron began looking into ways to create long-term solutions for elderly workers. He started researching policies on Social Security, pensions, and financial planning for retirees. Though still young, he knew that the issue of retirement security was something that needed more attention. Over time, more people followed his example. Schools started honoring long-serving staff members, local businesses created programs to assist elderly employees, and donations for senior support organizations increased. The ripple effect of one simple act of kindness had turned into something much greater. As the years passed, Mr. Henderson continued to enjoy his well-earned retirement. He often spoke about the young man who had changed his life, reminding people that compassion still existed in the world. Barron, on the other hand, remained focused on making a difference, whether through quiet acts of kindness or by supporting causes that mattered to him. And so, what began as a heartfelt gesture from one young man to an elderly janitor became a powerful reminder that kindness has no limits. One small action, fueled by empathy, had sparked a movement, one that continued to inspire people long after the moment had passed. Years later, Barron Trump's simple yet powerful act of kindness was still being talked about. Schools and communities across the country had embraced the message, finding ways to honor and support elderly workers who had spent their lives in service. What had started as a fundraiser for one janitor had turned into a broader conversation about how society could better take care of its aging workforce. Meanwhile, Barron remained true to himself, quiet, thoughtful, and always looking for ways to help behind the scenes. While he rarely spoke publicly about what he had done for Mr. Henderson, those who knew him best understood that it was just one of many acts of kindness he had carried out over the years. One day, Barron received a letter in the mail. It was from a school principal in a small town in Ohio. The letter detailed how a group of students had been inspired by his story and had come together to raise money for their own school janitor, a 76-year-old woman named Mrs. Callahan. After decades of service, she was still working because she couldn't afford to retire. The students had started a fundraiser in her honor, and within weeks they had collected enough money for her to finally retire comfortably. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note from Mrs. Callahan herself. "Because of what you did for Mr. Henderson, these kids did the same for me. Thank you for reminding the world that we still have the power to care for one another." Barron read the note twice, a small smile forming on his face. He didn't need recognition, and he certainly hadn't expected to start a movement. But knowing that his one act of kindness had inspired so many others reassured him that he was on the right path. As time passed, Barron continued to support charitable initiatives focused on elderly care, quietly donating to organizations that provided financial assistance to retirees. He also worked to promote better financial education for young people, hoping to help future generations prepare for retirement early so they wouldn't have to struggle later in life. Mr. Henderson, now fully retired and living comfortably with his family, often told the story of Barron Trump to anyone who would listen. Whenever someone asked him about the moment that changed his life, he would smile and say, "It wasn't just about the money. It was about being seen, about knowing that my years of hard work mattered to someone." And in the end, that was what mattered most. Barron's act of kindness had proven that no matter how big or small, a single gesture could change lives. It was a reminder that the world needed more compassion, more generosity, and more people willing to step up when they saw someone in need. And while Barron Trump never sought out the spotlight for what he had done, the legacy of his kindness lived on, inspiring countless others to follow in his footsteps and prove that humanity, at its best, is built on the foundation of looking out for one another. In a world often consumed by headlines of division and conflict, acts of genuine kindness have the power to remind us of our shared humanity. Barron Trump's heartfelt gesture toward Mr. Henderson was not just an isolated moment of generosity, it was a spark that ignited a much-needed conversation about the struggles of elderly workers and the importance of compassion in everyday life. What made this story so powerful was its simplicity. Barron didn't perform an extravagant act for attention or personal gain. Instead, he saw someone in need, listened to his story, and took action. His decision to help Mr. Henderson retire wasn't about making a statement. It was about doing what was right. And in doing so, he set an example for millions of people who realized they, too, had the power to make a difference in the lives of others. The impact of his kindness rippled across the country. Inspired by his actions, students, families, and entire communities started paying closer attention to the elderly workers in their own lives. People began reaching out to school custodians, grocery store clerks, and others who had spent decades working tirelessly, often without recognition. Fundraisers were launched, retirement plans were set up, and heartfelt conversations were had. But beyond the financial assistance, something even more meaningful happened. People started seeing these workers not just as employees, but as individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. For years, many of them had quietly dedicated themselves to serving others, never asking for anything in return. Barron's actions reminded the world that these workers deserved more than just a paycheck. They deserved dignity, respect, and the opportunity to rest after a lifetime of hard work. Mr. Henderson's life was forever changed, but so was Barron's. This experience reinforced his belief that small acts of kindness could have a massive impact. He continued to support charitable efforts focused on elderly care and financial literacy, using his platform to encourage others to give back in any way they could. His story became a testament to the idea that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a difference simply by caring. As time passed, the movement he unintentionally started continued to grow. More elderly workers received help, more conversations about retirement security took place, and more people were reminded of the importance of community and generosity. Barron's simple act of kindness had not only changed one man's life, it had shifted perspectives across an entire nation. This story serves as a powerful reminder that kindness doesn't require fame, wealth, or grand gestures. It starts with awareness, empathy, and a willingness to take action. Whether it's helping a neighbor, supporting a local worker, or simply acknowledging someone's hard work, every act of kindness creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond what we can see. And in the end, that's what truly matters. Not how much we achieve for ourselves, but how much we do for others. Barron Trump's story proves that compassion, when shared, has the power to change lives, inspire movements, and remind us all of the goodness that still exists in the world.